Adeline Virginia Woolf, née Stephen, January 25, 1882, March 28, 1941, known professionally as Virginia Woolf, was an English writer and one of the foremost modernists of the 20th century. During the interwar period, Woolf was a significant figure in London literary society and a central figure in the influential Bloomsbury group of intellectuals. Her most famous works include the novels Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, To the Lighthouse, 1927, and Orlando, 1928, and the book-length essay A Room of One's Own, 1929, with its famous dictum, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." Woolf suffered from severe bouts of mental illness throughout her life, thought to have been what is now termed bipolar disorder, 1, and committed suicide by drowning in 1941 at the age of 59. Virginia Woolf was born Adeline Virginia Stephen at 22 Hyde Park Gate in Kensington, London. Her parents were Sir Leslie Stephen, 1832–1904, and Julia Prince Duckworth Stephen. Leslie Stephen was a notable historian, author, critic and mountaineer. He was a founding editor of the Dictionary of National Biography, a work that would influence Woolf's later experimental biographies. Julia Stephen was born in British India to Dr. John and Maria Patil Jackson. She was the niece of the photographer Julia Margaret Cameron and first cousin of the temperance leader Lady Henry Somerset. Julia moved to England with her mother, where she served as a model for pre-Raphaelite painters such as Edward Burne-Jones. Julia named her daughter after the Patil family, Adeline after Lady Henry's sister, Adeline Marie Russell, Duchess of Bedford, and Virginia, the name of yet another sister, who died young, but also of their mother, Julia's aunt. Woolf was educated by her parents in their literate and well-connected household. Her parents had each been married previously and been widowed, and, consequently, the household contained the children of 3 marriages. Julia had 3 children by her first husband, Herbert Duckworth, George, Stella, and Gerald Duckworth. Leslie had first married Harriet Marion, Minnie, Thackeray, 1840–1875, the daughter of William Thackeray, and they had one daughter, Laura Makepeace Stephen, who was declared mentally disabled and lived with the family until she was institutionalized in 1891. Leslie and Julia had 4 children together: Vanessa Stephen, later known as Vanessa Bell, 1879, Thoby Stephen, 1880, Virginia, 1882, and Adrian Stephen, 1883. Sir Leslie Stephen's eminence as an editor, critic, and biographer, and his connection to William Thackeray, meant that his children were raised in an environment filled with the influences of Victorian literary society. Henry James, George Henry Lewis, and Virginia's honorary godfather, James Russell Lowell, were among the visitors to the house. Julia Stephen was equally well connected. She came from a family of beauties who left their mark on Victorian society as models for pre-Raphaelite artists and early photographers, including her Aunt Julia Margaret Cameron, who was also a visitor to the Stephen household. Supplementing these influences was the immense library at the Stevens house, from which Virginia and Vanessa were taught the classics and English literature. Unlike the girls, their brothers Adrian and Julian, Thoby, were formally educated and sent to Cambridge, a difference that Virginia would resent. The sisters did, however, benefit indirectly from their brothers' Cambridge contacts, as the boys brought their new intellectual friends home to the Stevens drawing room. According to Woolf's memoirs, her most vivid childhood memories were not of London but of Street Ives, Cornwall, where the family spent every summer until 1895. The Stevens summer home, Towand House, looked out over Porthminster Bay, and is still standing, though somewhat altered. Memories of these family holidays and impressions of the landscape, especially the Gaudreville lighthouse, informed the fiction Woolf wrote in later years, most notably To the Lighthouse. The sudden death of her mother in 1895, when Virginia was 13, and that of her half-sister Stella 2 years later, led to the first of Virginia's several nervous breakdowns. After her mother and half-sister, she quickly lost her surrogate mother, Stella Duckworth, as well as her cherished brother Thoby, when he was in his mid-20s. She was, however, able to take courses of study, some at degree level, in ancient Greek, Latin, German and history at the Ladies' Department of King's College London between 1897 and 1901. This brought her into contact with some of the early reformers of women's higher education, such as the principal of the Ladies' Department, Lillian Faithfull, one of the so-called Steamboat Ladies, Clara Pater, sister of the more famous Walter, and George Warr. Her sister Vanessa also studied Latin, Italian, art and architecture at King's Ladies' Department. In 2013, Woolf was honored by her alma mater with the opening of a building named after her on Kingsway, now King's College, London. The death of her father in 1904 provoked her most alarming collapse and she was briefly institutionalized. She spent time recovering at her friend Violet Dickinson's house, and at her Aunt Carolyn's house in Cambridge. Modern scholars, including her nephew and biographer, Quentin Bell, have suggested her breakdowns and subsequent recurring depressive periods were also influenced by the sexual abuse to which she and her sister Vanessa were subjected by their half-brothers George and Gerald Duckworth, which Woolf recalls in her autobiographical essays A Sketch of the Past and 22 Hyde Park Gate. Throughout her life, Woolf was plagued by periodic mood swings and associated illnesses. She spent 3 short periods in 1910, 1912 and 1913 at Burleigh House, 15 Cambridge Park, Twickenham, described as a private nursing home for women with nervous disorder. Though this instability often affected her social life, her literary productivity continued with few breaks throughout her life.